Greetings in the name of Jesus Christ. We're coming to you from Faith Assembly of God, Smiths Grove, Kentucky. We're a small country church out in the country. Our little town does not have a red light or a green light, but I want you to know we'll be on the map in that they're building a Buc-ee's. They've already probably spent over $1 million, and the walls are up, but we're going to have a Buc-ee's, so we're going to be on the map. My name is Wade Martin Hughes, Sr. I have been the pastor here at this church 34 years, and on the other side of the camera is Mr. Larry Carter, and I have seen, as I've watched, he's finally putting his name to the work. That means he's not ashamed of me as much as he used to be. And we have some things that we want to share on our heart. We believe Jesus is coming soon, and we want you to be ready. We are Faith Assembly of God, P.O. Box 331, Smiths Grove, Kentucky, 42171, or on the computer we are Kentucky Fingers at AOL.com, KYFINGERS at AOL.com. You can get a hold of us through that. Again, I have some thoughts that I really want to share. I want to reach back to old black spiritual song. I'm not a singer. I never have considered myself to be that. I'm a guitar picker, and I love to pick. Let's sing this song together. You'll know it. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Deep within my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We are not alone. We are not alone. We are not alone today. Deep in my heart, I do believe we are not alone someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Deep within my heart, I do believe we shall walk in hand someday. Truth will set us free. The truth will set us free. The truth will set us free someday. Oh, deep within my heart, I do believe truth will set us free someday. We are not afraid. number one killer in the world is heart. And it says in the book of Luke, for men's hearts failing them for fear. We're living in a day that if you watch the news, fear can really grip you, worry and all those things that goes with it. I'm not afraid. I believe God's got a plan and it'll all work out. Let's sing that last one more time. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Deep within my heart, I do believe we are not afraid today. Well, we've had an unbelievable busy week. Last Wednesday, I think we shared with you on our live stream last week, my cousin, Teddy Hughes, passed away, 64 years old. Very good man, very loving the Lord man, very church man. Monday and Tuesday, he worked at his church remodeling, and I got up on Wednesday, and his heart, he had a pacemaker and defibrillator in his heart, and it kept going off, and they was hoping to get him to Lexington. They got him to Mount Sterling, I think, and he was dead. It was probably the biggest funeral that I have personally ever done, and I've done a lot of funerals. As a matter of fact, on the other side of the camera, Mr. Larry Carter has helped me many times in funerals that I've done, have driven me to him and those things. But Teddy had this very unusual request. He'd asked me 20 years ago to preach his funeral, and this Easter, the weekend of Easter, I met with my family in Eastern Kentucky, and we sang. Teddy worked with Amish people, and they had a day where the Amish people was in this big place. The Amish people was sitting on the right-hand side, and my family, the Hugheses, are married to Hugheses, are friends of the Hugheses, were sitting on my left, and I had the guitar, and I was sitting right in the middle, and we went back and forth. They would sing their songs, and some of them they would sing in German, and we worshiped the Lord together. And then we took turns. The Hugheses all sang, and it was one of those Kodak moments that will forever stick in our memory. But Teddy and I had 3 or 4 hours together before the family gathered. I got there early. It's about a 4-hour drive, and I got there early, and we visited. And he said, I want you to make people laugh at my funeral. You have to understand Teddy. Teddy was a clown. He dressed up as a clown in parades all around the community. He kept a red nose in his pocket, and all those things. And while I've done a lot of funerals, I've never had the request. I've had some unusual requests. I had a funeral up at near Mount Washington. I had a funeral, and the family, right 5 minutes before the funeral, took me in a little room and said, we need to ask you something. They said, whatever you do, don't say anything good about Dad. I've had people ask me to fudge a little bit at funerals and that kind of, but they said, don't say anything good about him. I said, I can do that. And we did that. But Teddy wanted everybody to laugh. And I prayed since Easter. I've tried to think how on earth are you going to do a funeral and not seem to be sacrilegious and those things. And again, where I was speaking from, the Amish people was over on the left. It took 3 hours in line on Sunday to get in to the funeral home. And the crowd was capacity plus. And I'm going to say there was 350. I didn't count the people. I'm just guessing. And how on earth am I going to pull this off? And Friday, I went around Bowling Green looking for red noses, and I found 2 in the Halloween section at Walmart, and we found at a party store, I found 24 red noses, and we stopped in Mount Sterling and got a black magic marker, and I made a T for Teddy on all the noses. And I still don't know what I'm going to do. How am I going to take a text? I've never taken a text like this. My text was from Nehemiah 8:10. Everybody was crying. They was boo-hooing. Their life had been disappointing. Nehemiah 8. And finally the preacher steps up on the podium and he takes for his text, the joy of the Lord is our strength. Celebrate. And so I use that as my text. And I had given, again, I think I had 26 red noses, but privately aside, I pulled all my cousins, his brothers and sisters, the immediate family, and I gave them, I had it wadded up, and I just shook hands and gave them a red nose. I said, at whatever point I reveal, I'm going to put on my red nose. I'm going to ask everybody here to put on their red nose. They all had a T on it for Teddy, and so we took that as a text, and I got my guitar down, and Linda had sort of secretly carried it in. I was on the music part of the program, but we sang this song. We might as well sing it today, huh? You never know. Larry knows you never know what I'm going to do because I don't know what I'm going to do. But we sung this song. We sang, "The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength." Then we did, ah, 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 sing it with me, sing it with me. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord. Listen at your faces crack. Ah, ah. The joy of the Lord is my strength. One of the things I learned Sunday morning, we had talked to several of our cousins and asked them to meet us at a church in Stanton, and I got to sit around my cousins, a very rare treat in the church service, and I had my red nose in my pocket, and I always wondered why Teddy always carried one. Well, we was sitting in Hardee's eating biscuits and gravy, and some little kids were sitting at a booth over from us, and I put my nose on, and they turned and they looked and they laughed and they laughed, and their mom turned around to see what they're doing, and I took the nose off, so, and just act like, and then when the mom wasn't looking, I put the nose back on, and they laughed. And I saw one of Teddy's callings. Again, he had worked Monday and Tuesday remodeling the church, parsonage, I believe, and he liked to make people happy. I know some people that like to torture people and make them sad, but that's what he did. And I want to switch gears and get into the lesson. Teddy lived a very special life, and it was evident. They guessed that over 1,000 people was either at the funeral or at the wake, which means Teddy touched lives. He used humor. He would go to the school dressed up as a clown, those things. I want to talk about somebody needs you. I think we hear this cry in our society today that what can you do for me? It wasn't original to John F. Kennedy, but John F. Kennedy said these words, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. It was a slogan that was around for a long time. Abraham Lincoln said, united we stand, divided we fall, and he gets credit for that. Well, Jesus said that. I don't know that there's anything new under the sun, but I'd like us to think about not what you need, but what others need. Philippians 4:16 will be my 4:19. Philippians 4:19 will be my jumping off verse. Somebody needs you today. There's somebody hurting and aching and crying, depressed, sitting in a dark room. There's an old person in a rest home that nobody has come to visit. When I was a little boy, my dad pastored in Claremont County, Ohio, Bethel, Batavia, there. And I was in the 4th grade, and this lady at the rest home, I had a little guitar, and I played with my dad. And the little lady had a gourd, Halloween time. It was a little pear-shaped orange and green gourd, and she had it in her hand, and my dad asked her, what you doing with the gourd? She said, I'm saving it to give to my son. The next week we went and played at the rest home, and she still had the gourd in her hand. It was still in her hand. She again said, I'm saving this to give to my son. And her son had not been there. The 3rd week we went, the gourd was still in her hand, and it was rotting in her hand. She wouldn't let him take it away. And she had this, it wasn't rotten, but it was a rotting gourd in her hand to give to her son. And her son never claimed that gourd. Might I say somebody needs you? Philippians 4:19. But my God shall supply all your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. What are our needs? Well, we need air. We have to have water. I say that, and kids laugh and say, no, Cokes, you have to have water, a liquid. You have to have food. You have to have shelter. We have to have clothing. I think the more society goes on, the less that's needed. We need sanitation. There is a requirement in life of rest, relaxation. Our society is paying today in obesity because we don't see the need for exercise. And one of the saddest things that I can say as an old preacher, 44 years pastoring, one of the saddest things I can tell you is we don't know our purpose. If you don't know what your purpose is, in my opinion, you need to know your purpose. How else will you ever accomplish that? Need is a required, it's essential, it's a duty, it's obligation, it's lack. Let me read that to you out of the Message. Again, I don't want to cross any doctrine. I like the King James, but the Message can say things a little bit different. It says, you can be sure that God will take care of everything you need. His generosity exceeding even yours and the glory that pours from Jesus. We need more than air and water and food and shelter and clothing. We need to feel needed. I feel sorry for some children today. We need love. We need kindness. We need to give kindness to receive kindness. We need a sense of being accepted, a sense of being connected or belonging. That's why church can be very important. Of course, you can feel that at a bar, or at a nightclub, or at a football game. I believe if you spell my last name, you're going to come up with H-U-G, hug. I believe we need a sense of touch, although I will tell you that there's some people that don't want to be touched. As a matter of fact, we had a visitor here 4 or 5 years ago. I'm sure Larry would remember it. A very attractive lady. And when she stepped in the door, she said, I don't want nobody to touch me. Nobody touched me. You don't touch me. Nobody touched me. And you announced to everybody at church. I remember her name. You remember her name, Larry? It was one day of the week, but I get in trouble if I say it. And I said, hey, that's no problem. We can do whatever you want here. But I believe one of the basic human needs is we need to be touched. And I don't necessarily mean this. We just need to feel needed, that purpose. We need love. We need that. We need that. We need somebody to care for us. We need to care for others. We need emotional support. And one of the lost arts that we have today is communication. I teach a class on frozen communication lines, and I teach a class on creative use of conflict. We don't talk to each other. Oh, sure, there's exchange of words, but we don't listen. There is a lost art of listening. Everybody wants to talk. Nobody wants to listen. I love to listen to little kids. I have a need to teach. I have a need to learn, comfort and support. I need to develop a sense of understanding. Jesus had needs. Matthew 21 verse 2 is this beautiful story. I love this story. Jesus tells one of his boys, says, boys, I want you to go over into town and you're going to find a donkey. King James calls it something else, but I'm going to call it a donkey. The words are interchangeable. I'm going to call it a donkey. You're going to find a donkey tied up over there. Untie it and bring it to me. I need it. I need it. And if whoever owns it asks you why, just tell them the master needs it. Matthew 21 verse 2. Saying unto them, go into the village over against you, and straightway you'll find a donkey tied there, and a colt with her. Loose them, and bring them unto me. And if any man say aught unto you, you shall say, the Lord hath need of them, and straightway he will send them. Jesus had a need that was answered by a touch of somebody else, a connection point. Let me tell you a story. If you've ever listened to my live streams, you know I love stories. I taught school 6 years in Lee County, Virginia. All those years was at Woodway, just out of Pennington Gap, except my last year. I taught at Rose Hill. The price of gas had jumped, and so all the teachers moved to schools closer to home. But I was teaching at Woodway, and I was assistant principal at the school. Mr. Herndon was the principal, and he was actually the principal at two schools, Stickleyville and Woodway, and it's amazing what you can remember. And he would be at that school half the day, and so I would have to work the office. And there was this little boy, and I'm going to call him Trouble. He caused trouble. I saw him. That year I taught the 6th grade. I taught the 7th grade, and I taught the 6th grade different years. But I saw him coming up probably from the 3rd grade. I saw, and he'd be sent to the office. His 3rd grade teacher sent him to the office and demanded he be disciplined because he'd called her fat. Well, he shouldn't have done that, but she was fat. And the first thing any teacher learns is the trouble causers. And then the second thing you learn is the good students. And I knew Joe to be nothing but trouble. He was in the office so often. And back then we had corporal punishment. We don't have that today. And I'm not getting involved in that discussion. But he'd be sent to the office on a regular basis. And I prayed that the Lord would come back before Joe was in my class. Seriously. Joe was a nightmare. He was a good kid. He was just trouble. Everything around Joe was sort of trouble. Listen, troubled people are hurting people. Hurting people hurt people. And well, I lived long enough to have Joe in my classroom. And I started praying for Joe since Jesus wasn't going to come back and I was going to have him. I started praying, God, somehow I have to touch Joe, troubled Joe. I have to touch him some way. And Linda and I'd come home, and Linda loved grading the papers. She'd grade the papers, and I'd say, Joe caused this today, and Joe did this today, and we started praying about some kind of a strategy to touch Joe. And probably the third week, I did home visits. Probably the third week, I went. I told Joe, tell your mom and dad I'm coming for a home visit tomorrow. So Joe rode with me. I had a Volkswagen Beetle, and Joe rode with me. And he showed me how to get to their house, and we got their trailer, a nice trailer, a nice piece of land. And we got out, and the first thing I noticed was their dog was what I call a whip syndrome dog. His tail was tucked, the dog wouldn't raise his head, and we got up on the porch, and this mom come out and greeted us, and she had what I called a whip syndrome, dog syndrome. She wouldn't look in the eyes, she wouldn't hold her head up. She was very soft-spoken, and I'm learning something about Joe. We opened the door and we go in the trailer. They actually invited me to stay for supper, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't think that proper. But there's Joe's dad. He's barking more than the dog is. The dog didn't bark. It knew better. And he was screaming at Joe and at the wife. And there was a case of beer, Budweiser, sitting to the left of the Lazy Boy recliner. I don't know for sure. I'm going to say there was 50 or 60 empty beer cans on the right side of the chair. We had a good visit, but I understood Joe more than ever before. Troubled Joe wasn't troubled, he was hurt. And his dad screamed and hollered. Some people think that the louder you scream, the more you're going to be heard. I found just because you're loud does not mean you're right. I left the house that day, the trailer, got in the car and started driving home. I lived about 50 miles from the school. And I started crying. And I seen Joe as I'd never seen Joe before. I seen Joe as a hurting kid instead of a troubled kid. And I didn't know what to do. It wasn't enough for social services, nothing like that. Just Joe was. One day Joe fell asleep in class. I just let him sleep. When the other kids left the room, he apologized to me and said, Mr. Hughes, I'm very sorry I fell asleep today. But he said, Mom and Dad fought all night long, and I stayed up to make sure and protect my sisters. If Joe went to sleep in class, I let him sleep. I started giving Joe, back then it was $0.25 for ice cream. And in the evening break at school, there was an ice cream machine out in the hallway. And the secretary from the office sold ice cream during break. Joe, in all the years I'd observed Joe, I never seen him get an ice cream. He never had the money to get an ice cream. I slipped Joe some money to buy my ice cream, and I remember the look as he stood in the hallway of that school and ate that ice cream. It touched Joe. I started on a regular basis slipping Joe some ice cream money. And after prayer, we decided that Joe needed some one-on-one touch. And I said to Joe one day as they was going out to Phys Ed, I said, Joe, would you like to stay behind and wash the chalkboard? You remember chalkboards? Larry, surely you remember chalkboards. The chalk makes dust and the chalkboard. And we had a gallon can that green beans came in the kitchen and a sponge, and he erased it and he washed it. And I bragged on him. I said, Joe, I believe you wash that board better than anyone that I've ever seen wash it. And we talked for a while, and I got to know him and he got to know me. Joe wasn't trouble. Joe was hurting. He was hurting real bad. I believe you have some Joes in your life that's hurt you, that's troubled you, that's been mean to you, been all of that. If we could just have understanding. It wasn't too long till one day out in the hall, Miss Rogers, that taught the first grade in the room next to my room, she taught there. I heard her tell Joe, I see something different in you. And it got where Joe wasn't causing trouble. He just needed a touch. Somebody needs you. I would go by and taking the spelling test or whatever, I'd just lay my hand on his shoulder, pat him on the back. It got where Joe volunteered to stay behind when the other kids gone, just to spend some one-on-one time with me. And I slowly saw Joe change until a week or two before Christmas. Joe was caught kissing a girl. We can't tolerate that. We can't tolerate that. Joe was sent to the office, and Mr. Herndon was over the mountain. And I said, what have you done now, Joe? I said, you've been doing so well. You haven't been in the office in a long time. He said, Mr. Hughes, he said, I needed to make a quarter. I started to put Joe out away from me for the paddle. Hot tea was the name of the paddle. And again, I'm not for paddling. It was just part of my job. I made kids do extracurricular activity when they got in trouble. And he explained to me he kissed a girl, the prettiest, probably one of the wealthiest girls in this school. I said, Joe, why'd you kiss her? He said, to make a quarter. I said, Joe, what did you need a quarter for? He said, I can't tell you. I can't tell you. I kept pressing him, Joe, why did you kiss the girl for a quarter? There's another girl in our class that's mom and dad owned a store, and they had these square samples of leather, different colors of leather, and she brought those to school and she sold them 4 for a quarter. And Joe said, I needed 4 pieces of leather. And I said, Joe, what did you need the leather for? And he said, Mr. Hughes, I hate to tell you, but I'm going to make you a Christmas present. I started telling you I'd push him out and he'd be back close. And I said, Joe, what are you doing? He said, Mr. Hughes, the closer I stand to you, the less it hurts. Boy, will that preach. The closer you stand to God, the less the correction hurts. I let Joe off. Another teacher demanded that I actually took my paddle and swatted the bottom of my shoe 3 times. I said, Joe, I'll kill you if you ever tell that I didn't spank you. Joe liked me even more. He asked to borrow my glue and my staplers, and he made this little pouch out of the pieces of leather. He wrapped it up in some notebook paper and taped it and gave it to me for Christmas. 45 years later, I got cologne for Christmas. I got neckties for Christmas. I got all of these things. But the only gift I still have is that quarter gift from Joe. There's somebody out there, again, that's been mean to you. They've hurt you. That they've done all of these things. Joe got to be probably one of the best volunteering students that I ever had. And I will tell you, one person can make a difference. Jude says, and some have compassion, make a difference. We made a difference in Joe's life. Somebody's hurting today. You know a Joe. Their name might be Sally, or it might be Wanda, or it might be Jason. I've gotten in trouble several times in the ministry because I go to the jail. I've gotten in trouble with my own family because when I go to jail, I usually leave money on the telephone card so they can call their family. I left money for a guy to call his family. He called me. And I said, listen, I didn't give you that money to call me. I visit you. You've got a mom that would love to hear from you. I bought that card for you, Joe. I find that life is so full of hurting people. And again, hurting people hurt people. But somehow we need as Christians to see the needs of other people. Jesus needed the donkey. He borrowed it for a little while. Somebody needs you. Somebody needs you. Somebody's hurting. Some of us love lovely people. I love the Corvettes. Have you seen the new Corvettes? They're mid-engine. They're beautiful. Just to the right of my road, all the Corvettes are brought into a lot there, and they sit there waiting the delivery. I love vets. But I drive a Captiva. I drive an old Dodge pickup truck. We've got to love. Anybody can love lovely people. Jesus calls us to love ugly people, mean people, bad people, alcoholics. Love gives. Listen, hear me, and hear me well. My heart's so heavy. You can give without loving. That guy standing on the corner, you put a $20 bill in his hand, he's got a laptop computer, he's got a cell phone, and he's got cigarettes. You can give without loving, but you can't love without giving. And there's somebody out there today, I feel sorry for old people. I remember visiting an old lady in her 90s. She had her phone sitting on her lap. That's back when they had the cord and you done this. And I said, what are you doing? She said, I'm just praying that one of my kids will call me, talk to me for a little while. I found great joy in going and getting old people and taking them for a ride. As much as I travel, I probably like to stay home. I remember taking, you can't do this nowadays, but years ago you could. I remember taking Marty and Josh, my two boys, and Linda, and we visited. They were little. And we'd take an old lady for a ride, and we'd stop at the Druthers restaurant and buy her a hamburger. Somebody's hurting today. She was a lady that not a whole lot of people liked because she was rather plain spoken. There was no filter on her mouth. Luke 6:38 says, "Give, and it shall be given to you. A good measure, pressed down and shaken together and running over, shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure that you mete, withal it shall be measured to you." If you give hurting people a spoonful, you're going to get a spoonful. If you give them a shovelful, you're going to get it. If you give them a dump truck full. I'm talking about more than money. I'm talking about time, effort, planning. It says in the Message, give away your life. I love that. I love that. Give away your life. Give away your life. You'll find life given back to you. As I gave to Joe, something changed in me. Today, 45 years later, thereabouts, I found the more I give away my life, travel 4 hours to do a funeral, 2 nights in a motel, the eats, the gas. Monday I got to see my mom's only living sibling and spend some time with him from Florida. It was in Cincinnati. They met us in Lexington. The more you give away your life, sometimes it might cost you sleep. I've learned something about intercession. I pray for people and they'll never know that I've ever prayed for them. What am I praying for? Don't let your right hand know. It says, Message, give away your life and you'll find life given back to you. But not merely given back with a bonus and a blessing. Giving, not getting. In this way, generosity begets generosity. Somebody needs you today. Somebody's hurting. Somebody's depressed. Somebody's discouraged. Your pastor has preached his heart out. Again, please forgive me for squirming, and my hip hurts. Your pastor's preached his heart out. He's studied. He's visited. He's done all of those things. See, we wear masks. He can't show you what's really going on. Somebody is in their family. The husband and wife have been fighting and fighting. The kids have been mean to the parents. The kids never visit their parents, never call them. They just need somebody. You could be that somebody. You could be that somebody. But they hurt me. That's the test. Again, that's not special love, loving people that love you. Special love, Jesus' love, is on the cross and the blood running down his arms. He's dying with spit caked and dried on him. They stick the sword in his side. And he loved them. Father, forgive them. He said prior, he said, if there's any way this can pass from me, but not my will, your will. The people that need you might be the people that hurt you, that crucified you, that somebody needs you. Don't tell me how they hurt you or how often they hurt you. Somebody needs you. They're in desperate need. My cousin was 64. I'm 71. When he'd ask me to preach his funeral, I'd always laugh and say, you'll outlive me. Come and sing at my funeral. How often, God, can they hurt me and me get over it? I'm going to tell you a little story here. I was sitting in a church the other day someplace, and the guy sitting in front of me. I'm not advocating tattoos. I don't have a tattoo. I don't want a tattoo or anything. But the guy sitting in front of me had his arm around his wife. And he had tattooed on his arm 7 and an X 70. 7 times 70. Wow, that witnessed to me. Am I willing to love somebody that's hurting and minister to their need? What does the Lord require of you? That was Matthew 18:21. How oft shall I forgive? 7 times. That's the Jewish tradition. And Jesus said, no. The nth degree, 7 times 70, which is 490, right, Larry? One time I said 420, and Larry corrected me. It's 490 times forgive. Love anyway. What does God need from you? Micah 6 verse 8. And he hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. What does God expect of you? Mark 12:29. Jesus, the guy says, what do you have to do to be saved? Jesus said, the first commandment's to love the Lord your God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. This is the first commandment. Okay, what's the second one? To love your neighbor. To love your neighbor. Somebody needs you today. Somebody needs you today. Somebody needs you today. Don't quit. Don't build a wall between you or a barrier between you and other people. You think you're safeguarding to build a fence not only keeps other people out, but it traps you in. The way of the cross is to love. Somebody needs you. What could you do? What could you do? What could you do? Jeremiah 29:11. God says, for I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord. Thoughts of peace, not of evil, to give you an expected end. Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. My trophy case is empty. If you know me, that's not quite the truth. There's probably 20 plaques out there on the wall, Larry. Volunteer of the Year, Volunteer Group of the Year. One of the highest honors of my life was the Lifetime Achievement Award I received several years ago. Hey, I'm not looking for trophies. You hear me? I'm not looking for trophies. I'm looking for hurting people that somehow at the funeral home. I talked to a little lady at the funeral home. Her husband is very sick. He can't walk anymore. He's in a wheelchair and she has to take care of him. I thanked her for what she done and how she took care of her husband. She started bawling like a baby. And I said, what you're doing is as important as the ministry that I'll have. Somebody needs you today. I've changed diapers. I've changed 2 diapers on babies in my lifetime. But I've changed a lot of diapers on grown-ups that's dying. One man told me, I hate for Mom to have to change my diaper. He's a grown man. I had grown kids. And I told him, as long as I'm here, she don't have to change her diaper. I'll change. I gagged. But the work of the Lord takes many forms. Somebody needs you. Somebody needs you. We asked 2 things. Number 1, if at all possible, could you pass this on to somebody else? I need you to do that. And some of you do that. But the main thrust of everything that we do is not recognition. It's that you come to know Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. The trophy that I wear is right here. Can you focus in on that, Larry? Is it straight? Since 1974, I've wore a cross. Then they bought me a cross when I graduated from college, and I very rarely miss it. With this going on in Israel right now, I've traded my cross. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross. Listen to this. And exchange it someday for a crown. I thank everyone that watches this. I thank Mr. Larry Carter on the other side of the camera. His time, his talent, helping spur me in the ministry. But I want to tell you something. If you don't know Jesus Christ as your Savior, you have wasted your life. Today is the day. Thank you for tuning in. Faith Assembly of God, P.O. Box 331, Smiths Grove, Kentucky 42171, or kyfingers@aol.com. Thank you for watching.